Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 4 and we will explain about post-colonial discourse. Before we start to presenting, let me introduce our member. I'm Cynthia Nabilah and the other members are Firda Meiyasa, Rizky Andini, Siti Mursyidatul Abidah, and Siti Khofifah Neli Melinda. This is our contents. First is about introduction to post-colonialism, and the second is post-colonial or post-colonialism. The third, what is post-colonial discourse? And the fourth, the example of post-colonial discourse. And the last, post-colonial discourse and its impact on literature. We move to first material. It's about introduction to post-colonialism.
First is introduction to post-colonialism. What is post-colonialism? Post-colonialism is the academic study of the cultural legacy of colonialism and imperialism, focusing on the human consequence of the control and exploitation of colonized people and their lands. Or in short, we can say that post-colonialism is the study of the legacies of colonialism and imperialism. Post-colonialism is often explored in literature and the arts. The main idea of post-colonialism is to study the cultural shift that occur in the context of colonialism or imperialism. Post-colonial literary criticism comprehends the literature written by the colonizer and the colonized, wherein the subject matters includes portraits of the colonized people and their life as imperial subjects. The goal of post-colonialism. The ultimate goal of post-colonialism is accounting for and combating the residual effects of colonialism on cultures. It is not simply concerned with salvaging world in the past, but learning how the world can move beyond this period together toward a place of mutual respect.
And the next is post-colonial or post-colonialism. Post-colonialism, or often said as post-colonialism, deals with the effects of colonialization on cultures and societies, as originally used by historians after the Second World War in terms such as the post-colonial state. Post-colonial had a clearly chronological meaning, designating the post-independence period. The prefix post in the term also continues to be a source of vigorous debate amongst critics. The simpler sense of the post as meaning after colonialism has been contested by a more elaborate understanding of the working of post-colonial cultures, which stretch the articulations between and across the politically defined historical periods of pre-colonial, colonial, and post-independence cultures. It is clear that post-colonialism, as it has been employed in the most primarily concerned to examine the process and the effects of and reactions to European colonialism from the 16th century up to and including the neo-colonialism of the present day. And the next is post-colonial discourse.
Post-colonial discourse is a special postmodern intellectual discourse consisting of reaction and analysis of the cultural heritage of colonialism and imperialism. So, post-colonial discourse is a discourse which is a form of reaction from people who criticize the cultural heritage left by the colonizers. Postcolonial discourse aims to account for and combat the residual effects of colonialism on cultures. It is not just about saving the past world, but learning how the world can move beyond this period together towards a place of mutual respect. In addition, postcolonial discourse also aims to open up space for many voices that have previously been silenced by the dominant ideology subalterns. It is widely recognized in discourse that this space must first be cleaned up in academia. Edward Said, in his book Orientalism, gives a clear picture of how scholars study what was then called the Orient, mostly Asia. However, they ignore the views of the people they are actually studying and prefer to rely on the intellectual superiority of themselves and their peers. To the extent that Western scholars were aware of contemporary Orientals or Oriental movements of thought and cultures, these were perceived either as silent shadows to be animated by the Orientalists, brought into reality by them, or as a kind of cultural and international proletariat useful for the Orientalists' grander interpretive activity.
Next slide is about the example of post-colonialism. The first example is India was colonized by the British from the 1970s until India gained its independence in 1947. As a result of British colonialism, Indian society had to experience impact in various fields, such as economic, politics, discourse, and also emotional. So the colonialization carried out by British in 1970s on India had an impact on Indian societies in various fields, such as economic, politics, discourse, and also emotional. The second example is the end of World War II is a sign of the formation of a new period for the people of Africa and Asia that have been colonized before. Although many new countries have been established on two continents as well as in Latin America, the previous colonial powers still influenced some of their fields such as politics, economy, military, and culture. So after the end of World War II, several new countries that had existed on two continents, they are Africa and Asia and also Latin America, were still affected by the effect of the colonial past. Politics, economy, culture, and military are some areas that are still influenced by the previous colonialism. And the last example is partition of Poland. So sorry, I will repeat. So the last example is partition of Poland 1772 to 1918 and occupation of Eastern European countries by the Soviet Union after the Second World War was a form of colonialism which dominated European empires, Prussia, Austria, Russia, and later the Soviets over neighboring
territories: Belarus, Bulgaria, Hungary, Lithuania, Moldova, Poland, Romania, and Ukraine, such as military invasion, exploitation of man and nature, efforts to re-educate local people in the imperial language. This was similar to the conquest of overseas territories by Western European powers. Apart from factors such as geographic proximity and racial differences that disappeared.
Now, I am Rizky and I will talk about the impact of post-colonialism in literature. Post-colonialism, in its theoretically form, originates in 1978 with the publication of Said's Orientalism. Said changed the agenda of non-Western studies in culture and literature and directed it to what is called now post-colonial theory. The latter emphasizes cultural displacement and their effect on identity and how the displaced have defended themselves. According to Said, the influence of imperialism in the beliefs does not end with the removal of a colonial or imperial power. Thus, imperialism shaped the culture of the colonized. Besides, the discourse between the colonized and the dominant empire will continue even with the end of military force of colonialism. Therefore, post-colonial theory focuses on the relationship between the metropolis and its colonial subjects. In addition, it focuses on colonial oppression, resistance to colonization, the respective identities of colonizer and colonized, and interaction between them. Colonial theory has influenced the way we read texts, the way we understand national and transnational histories, and the way we understand the political implications of our own knowledge as scholars. As a result, the 19th century's literary texts begin to be read in the light of Said's term of the encounter between the colonizer and the colonized. The readings of these texts focus on how the two identities of the center and the other are constructed within that colonial condition. Moreover, the literary text of the 19th century women writer becomes a key issue as some critics unite the post-colonial with the concern of the discourse of feminism. The female writer functions in the scope of the imperialist project. Through reference to the feminist history of the novel, clearly it has colluded with the strategy of imperialism. As the example, the works of Charlotte Brontë and Alfred Brand, for example, are important for their interest in issues of sexuality, authenticity, and the politics of language. Post-colonial literature is classified by some critics as written texts produced by authors born in colonized countries, but in most cases, their countries gain independence. Therefore, this kind of literature tends to portray the struggle of subject people to face poverty, financial instability, and cultural disturbance. Post-colonial literature depicts uncertainty of national and cultural identities of those who are trying to construct a nation under colonial rule. Usually, this kind of literature tends to use some traits to tell stories like satirical novel, magical, or realist novel.
Post-colonial literature also becomes relevant because it is capable of providing a representation of the suppressed as well as the suppressor, and hence offers a representation of conflicting views and ideologies. Thank you.